Holy crap, does time fly? And it's about time I post an actual video that's not a reaction video, huh? What's up, fellow aviators? RandomEd787 here. And today I thought I'd get my thoughts on the 40th anniversary update that we would just received for Flight Simulator a few weeks ago. As you know, me and Flight Simulator go back quite a ways. I've been a fan since FS 2004 and been always hankering for a new simulator since FSX. And no, Microsoft Flight doesn't count. I didn't even bother purchasing that garbage. But then, lo and behold, at E3 2019, Microsoft unveiled a new flight simulator for the new generation, and yes, I got a little excited from that trailer, as you may know. Is this a Microsoft Flight Simulator? Now, while I did complain quite a bit about the state of release and the lack of polished and broken updates, I have to say Flight Simulator is pretty much at the point where I want it. The real-world weather is mostly accurate, crashes have been fixed, and the performance is solid. Although for some reason, whenever I plug in a USB device, sometimes on the main menu, the game still crashes, and this has been a bug since, I don't know, launch. One thing I want to talk about is a term that I despise, and that's games as a service. I hate this term because it just shows the laziness of developers. It gives them the mindset to release an unfinished game and patch it later and the consumer won't care. Now, I don't have as much of a problem when the game is free to play, but when I put money up front, you better deliver the goods. Well, I can safely say that Asobo Studios is easily one of the best, if not the best example of games as a service done right, and I still hate saying that term. To me, games are a product, and that product should get support. The second you treat a product as a service, you begin to look at your product as nothing more than a money printing machine. But if this is what games as a service could actually be, without the launch problems of course, I think I get a boarding pass for this flight. Asobo has continuously updated Flight Simulator with varying degrees of success, but recently, I think they learned their lesson with Sim Update 10 and Sim Update 11. Sim Update 10 was delayed twice to make sure it didn't have major problems at launch. And it was a great release, and Sim Update 11 was even better. Though I did have problems initially downloading the update. So now let's talk about some of the content that the 40th anniversary brings, cause there's quite a bit of it. I'll mostly be talking about the planes since that's what me and I'm sure many others were mostly excited for. So on the topic of planes, what do I think of them in this update? Well, let me just say this is the most I played Flight Simulator in a long time. I've been having an absolute blast flying almost all these planes. From helicopters to the Spirit of St. Louis, the Douglas DC-3, gliders, etc. Asobo has absolutely nailed it with the aircrafts in this update. So let's take a deeper dive into some of these planes. I won't be covering all of them, but there are a few that stood out to me. Let's start off with the plane that surprised me the most, and that's the de Havilland DHC-2 Beaver. That's a bit of a tongue twister. This isn't just my favorite plane from the update. This is one of my favorite planes in the game, period. Now, I know this wasn't made by Asobo and was made by Blackbird Simulations, but seriously, this plane had me instantly hooked by its level of detail and just how fun it is to fly. From the vibration of the engine shaking the cockpit, the authentic sound effects, to the small customizations you can do by using the airplane's tablet, this plane will immerse you instantly. It also comes with two versions, one as a typical tail dragger, as well as a land and sea amphibian. I just love the fact that Asobo has been teaming up with these high quality third-party developers to give us free content like this. Like I said in the beginning, if you're gonna support a product for a long period of time, this is just one of the many examples of how to do it right. Seriously, if you're looking for a fun tail dragger or seaplane in the sim, this is probably the best plane in the game, period. Next on the list, let's get rid of our engines for a bit and talk about some gliders. Some of you may not know, but I'm currently training as a student pilot to get my private glider license. I have about 20 flights logged in, so I think I have a somewhat good idea as to how these gliders should feel. My verdict? Gliding in Flight Simulator is so incredibly satisfying and addicting. I didn't think Asobo would do this good. I thought it was just gonna be a little more than bare bones, kinda basic. But nope, this was not half-assed at all. While I wouldn't say these are 100% accurate, they definitely felt similar to what I do in my real gliding lessons. One of the key things I looked for was just how much rudder input I would have to use, and Azobo did not disappoint on this. Gliders require a lot of rudder control. Even in straight and level flight, you will be always working the rudder. Although straight and level flight doesn't require as much rudder as I would like it to, they definitely nailed it when you make turns. You need a lot of rudder input to stay coordinated. Since gliders have such big wings, they're more heavily affected by adverse yaw, thus requiring more rudder. While on the topic of rudders, I absolutely love it that you gotta give the signal for takeoff by waving the rudder back and forth along with the wingman actually giving the signal. That is a small touch that I really love. If I had a few nitpicks, it would be that the tow plane only makes left turns. It would be kinda nice to see it turn right a few times just to get a little bit of variety. Also, I would kinda like to set my own course for the tow pilot to take me instead of having it just be predetermined. Not that I have much of a problem with it as it is, but there are some instances where the tow plane will literally, fly you into a mountain. Also, the yaw string just seems to be a tad bit too long. It kind of makes it tough to even keep the thing straight at all. One final thing that I'll mention that I love about the inclusion of gliders is the fact that Azobo actually has glider airstrips displayed throughout the world, so you can get an idea of where the best soaring conditions might be. I did have varying degrees of success, but I think that a lot of that has to do with the season, time of year and stuff like that. But I did manage to get some nice ridge soaring at times. Alright, on to the next aircraft. Let's talk briefly about helicopters. This has easily been one of, if not the most requested type of aircraft for the sim. Now personally, I'm not much of a helicopter person, but I have to admit, they are pretty damn fun to fly in this sim. Honestly, there's nothing quite like zooming past the highway over 100 miles per hour while just a few feet off the ground. Really gets the blood pumping. Now I obviously can't say how accurate they feel, but I can definitely tell you when you turn off all the assists, these are quite the challenge, especially doing something as simple as taking off or hovering. You're definitely gonna struggle a bit. Now let's go back in the past and pay some of the oldies some respect. We'll start off with one of my favorite vintage planes in the game, the Spirit of St. Louis. The reason I love this plane so much is just how old and rigid it feels. And Azobo and the Air and Space Museum, because they worked on this plane as well, definitely nailed the details on this. The one thing that is extremely challenging about flying this plane is the fact that it has no front windshield. The reason for this was when Charles Lindbergh made his transatlantic flight from New York to Paris, he didn't have enough fuel for just the left and right fuel tanks alone, so he made the decision to put a fuel tank at the nose of the plane as well. He made use of seeing out in front of him by looking out his left and right windows, as well as a little periscope on the instrument panel to see in front of him. I've already flown this plane a few times in the sim, and I'll easily be doing it a lot more. Don't let the lack of a front window keep you from flying this beautiful bird. It really deserves your attention. Another vintage plane I absolutely love is the Curtiss Jenny. This plane is honestly as challenging, if not more challenging than the Spirit. Mainly due to the fact you don't have a lot of instruments to work with in the cockpit. You don't even have an airspeed indicator, so you gotta listen for all that wind in your face as well as how the plane is controlling. This plane also has that old and rigid feel that, I just love it so much. I just love planes that offer this kind of challenge because at the end of the day, they only make you a better pilot. If there is one thing I'd say I don't like about the Jenny is that it has an abysmal climb rate. Seriously, it'll take you about 5 to 10 minutes to just get to 3,000 feet, so a little bit of patience is required. And the last plane I like to talk about is the Douglas DC-3. This, in my opinion, is probably the toughest tail dragger to fly in the game. This is a plane that requires your full attention at all times, no dozing off unless you turn on the autopilot. The main thing I found difficult with this plane is not just landing it, but keeping it centered on the runway. But you know what they say, practice makes perfect. So I flew it a few more times to get the hang of it, and I managed to pull off some smoother landings. I would talk about this next plane in depth, but it had so many performance issues, I'm not gonna even bother with it right now. And that's the Airbus A310. I'm not kidding, my frames were in the 20s if not the 10s. Luckily, a patch was recently released for the plane and fixed the performance issues. But I just don't have the time to dive deep into this plane because of its study level quality. So, those are the planes that stood out to me the most and that I had the most fun with. And yeah, I know I missed a few planes like the Grumman Goose, the Hughes H4 Hercules, and the Wright Flyer. Well, to be fair, there's not much to say about the Wright Flyer. It wasn't really well known for its traveling distance. But it is a fun little plane to fly every now and then. Plus, Azobo included a catapult system to launch it, which I found to be pretty neat. Well, that pretty much does it for the planes, so let's talk about another feature that was requested: missions. Previous versions of Flight Simulator came with various missions and challenges for you to complete, with FSX having the best ones, mainly because they had a bit of a narrative around them and were far more interactive. Azobo has brought back numerous missions from FS 2004 and FSX, along with some new ones. To be honest though, these don't really appeal to me all that much. I did take a look at a few, and honestly, it's the only part of this update that's kind of underwhelming. So finally, I'll talk about the overall stability of the sim. From my experience, it's been running very well. I have been having a lot of stutters and minor freezes on the world map for some reason, but nothing that crashes the game. One problem that I'm seeing still consistently persist with Flight Simulator is weather popping. Out of nowhere, the weather will instantly change, which really breaks my immersion. I know Azobo has said they've been coming out with fixes on this, but I have yet to see that personally. But at least the weather is accurate most of the time, which has been one of my long-time complaints. And that's pretty much all the main topics I wanted to cover. I have to say, this is easily the best update that Azobo has provided thus far, and I'm super excited to see what the future holds. I'm also very glad that Azobo isn't rushing these updates as of late and taking their time, because it's really showing in their updates. So now, I want to hear from all of you. Tell me what you like most about the update, and what plane is your favorite from it. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll catch y'all later. Happy flying.